My name is Tynan Shah, and today I'm going to do my best to inform and convince you all that legalizing sports betting across the nation is in our best interest. So, you can't talk about gambling without first talking about the risks involved. Gambling is never a fair game in any form. Whether it's a lottery, blackjack, the roulette wheel, or even sports betting, the odds will never be in your favor. If you can't afford to lose, don't play. And if you aren't winning, walk away. That's not to say there's nothing positive about gambling. It can be a fun activity to do with friends or family, and sports betting can add higher stakes to sporting events, even with a small bet like $1. We'll start by going over some brief history about sports betting, where it all started, what happened to bring it to where it is today, and what the future may hold in store for it. After that, we'll look at the economic benefits of sports betting and how legalizing it can make the current underground industry a much safer place for everyday bettors. By the end of my presentation, I hope I'll have provided you all with ample information about the world of sports betting to have an opinion on whether or not you believe it should be legalized in all states. Sports betting has been around since the creation of any kind of sport. Kings and queens bet on jousting matches between knights in the Dark Ages, and the ancient Romans bet on fights in the Colosseum. And Americans have been betting on baseball games since the late 1800s. This all changed, however, in 1992 when the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, or the PASPA Act, was passed by the Supreme Court, which transferred the power to legalize sports betting from the states and into the hands of the federal government. This also prohibited any state that hadn't already legalized sports betting from ever doing so. So, at the time when the act was passed, Nevada was the only state in the nation that allowed sports betting, which is a big part of why it's become the gambling oasis it is today. A lot of states didn't agree with this decision, and over the years, that tension built up to legal action. And in the years between 2012 and 2018, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie battled the Supreme Court on the issue of restoring the power to legalize sports betting back to the states. Christie, and other states, wanted to get in on the growing sports betting industry that was blossoming illegally across the nation. In May of 2018, Christie won his battle with the courts, and the PASPA Act was repealed for good. The states once again had the power to legalize sports betting. And only 3 years since, an ESPN map of the country shows that 22 more states have legalized sports betting, and all but 3 have made strides toward legalization. So why would 22 states instantly legalize sports betting? What's in it for them? And the answer for that is simple: money. According to the American Gambling Association, every year about $4.2 billion is legally gambled at sports books in Vegas. That's a lot of money, but an estimated $150 billion is illegally gambled across the country each year. To put that into a percentage, Las Vegas only sees about 2.8% of sports betting wagers. This means the rest of that can't be taxed and it doesn't count towards GDP. So with all this money going unaccounted for from the GDP each year, most states want in on the action to increase their tax revenue and raise their GDP. Another important piece of sports betting puzzle is the bettors themselves. When the PASPA Act was active between 1992 and 2018, bettors had no choice but to turn to shady underground bookies. And bookies are people who take bets on sporting events and set their own odds. And because it's illegal, there's no regulation, so bookies can make odds as unfair or fair as they want, all at their own discretion. In recent years, offshore websites such as Bovada or Roobet have been really popular ways to get around the ban without leaving the safety of their own home. Stuff like this puts everyday bettors at large risk of being scammed or building a debt too big to pay off, which endangers not only themselves but their families too. To me, this feels a lot like the situation we read about in the Sample P3 essay that was describing prostitution. In that essay, they were arguing that by legalizing prostitution, we can make a safer work environment and create regulation in an otherwise tumultuous industry of prostitution. And I think that same kind of approach applies to sports betting. If we legalize it nationwide, we can eliminate the middleman from the equation, or the bookie, and allow sports bets to be controlled on a state or federal level, creating a much safer atmosphere for bettors. So what can we do? In the coming years, if sports betting is not already legal in your state, there will no doubt be a state question posed about it. I encourage all of you who agree with my logic and think that sports betting should be legalized to go and vote in the polls and make a better future for sports betting. And so I have a few questions. The first question is from Nick, and he says, are there any studies that have shown that with an increase in sports betting, there is also an increase in addiction to gambling? And to that, I would say no. There's not really any studies into that yet. Sports betting, the PASPAC got repealed in 2018, so it's pretty new. I'm sure once it gets legalized across more states, that people will start looking at like how negative this is. But I would say that if there's an increase in like if any new type of gambling comes out, like sports betting, there's gonna be an increase in addiction because it's new, it's people want to do it, and so I think yes, there's no studies, but in my opinion, an increase in sports betting does lead to an increase in gambling addictions. The next question is from Avery, and she says, how would legalizing sports betting affect the sports/game itself? Do you think it would change how sports are viewed or how teams can recruit players? So that's a really interesting question. This is kind of the basis on which the PASPA Act was founded. Former NBA star Bill Bradley was the senator that proposed the PASPA Act, and he and all like the NBA, the NFL, the NCAA, they were all really against sports betting because they saw it damaging the integrity of the leagues. And we've had baseball players like Pete Rose or NBA star Michael Jordan get caught for betting on games, even with their own team. And we've seen like Pete Rose should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he'll never get in because he bet on his team or bet against his team, and was and is seen as immoral and damages the integrity. So I think that because they ended up repealing the PASPA Act, that the sports leagues must be pretty confident that they can hold it down and not allow sports betting to like dissuade their industry into corruption like it did in the 90s. So because they were confident enough to overturn the PASPA Act, I don't think that's going to be an issue anymore. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys have a good break.